The popular conception of the Illuminati is one of near-divine competence, a shadow government that has successfully orchestrated the rise and fall of nations for nearly 3 centuries. We are told they are the architects of the French Revolution, the puppeteers of the American Federal Reserve, and the hidden hand behind the music industry's biggest stars. Yet, the historical record presents a contradiction so jarring, it effectively short-circuits this narrative. The actual order of the Illuminati was a chaotic, fratricidal organization that collapsed not because of its overwhelming power, but because its founder, Adam Weishaupt, could not manage his own vanity or his household scandals. You expect a story of terrifying efficiency. Instead, we introduce you to a group of neurotic academics who spent more time arguing over ritual costumes and secret nicknames than they did ruling the world. This juxtaposition sets the stage for the episode's core promise: to distill the difference between the Illuminati of myth, a psychological projection, and the Illuminati of history, a failed Enlightenment experiment. The episode anchors itself in the Illuminati, the secret society that hijacked the world by Jim Marrs. Marrs is a titan of conspiracy literature, and his work represents the pop science pole of our analysis. His central thesis is that the Illuminati never truly disbanded in 1785, but merely submerged, infiltrating the Freemasons and eventually morphing into modern globalist structures like the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission. This episode will dissect Marrs' claims not with cynicism, but with forensic precision. We will cross-reference his assertions with the definitive historical work, Perfectibilists, the 18th-century Bavarian Order of the Illuminati, by Terry Melanson, and recent academic papers on the psychology of conspiracy theories from University College London and others. The continuity of control. Jim Marrs' narrative relies heavily on the concept of unbroken continuity. In his view, the suppression of the Illuminati by the Bavarian electorate in 1785 was a false flag, a strategic retreat rather than a defeat. Marrs argues that Weishaupt and his inner circle successfully exported the order's ideology to France, sparking the Revolution of 1789, and to the United States via Thomas Jefferson and the Democratic Republican societies. This continuity thesis acts as a unifying field theory for modern history. It allows Marrs to connect the House of Rothschild, the Rockefeller dynasty, and the Federal Reserve System into a single lineage of control. For the reader, this is satisfying because it simplifies the chaotic complexity of global economics into a comprehensible narrative of us versus them. Marrs suggests that big banks and money manipulations are not the result of systemic market forces, but the deliberate machinations of a hereditary cabal. The symbolism of power. A significant portion of the pop narrative is dedicated to visual literacy, or rather, a specific form of visual illiteracy. Marrs and similar authors posit that the Illuminati hide in plain sight, using occult symbols to communicate with one another and to gloat over the uninitiated masses. The primary artifacts in this collection are the Eye of Providence, the all-seeing eye, and the unfinished pyramid, most famously found on the reverse of the United States $1 bill. In Marrs' analysis, these are not benign symbols of divine guidance or national building, but explicit signatures of ownership. The eye represents the surveillance state of the New World Order, and the pyramid represents the hierarchical structure of society where the masses support a tiny illuminated elite. This interpretation has bled deeply into pop culture, influencing everything from the Da Vinci Code to music videos by Jay-Z and Madonna, creating a self-reinforcing loop where the presence of the symbol in fiction is taken as proof of the fact in reality. The War on Religion. The third pillar of Marrs' book is the spiritual dimension of the conspiracy. He portrays the Illuminati not just as political subversives, but as fundamentally anti-religious, specifically anti-Christian. Drawing on the works of 18th-century critics like Abbé Baruel, Marrs suggests that the ultimate goal of the order is the abolition of all religion and the establishment of a secular humanistic world government. This narrative thread taps into deep-seated anxieties about secularization and modernity. By framing the Enlightenment ideals of reason and skepticism as Luciferian or satanic strategies, Mars appeals to a reader's fear of moral decay. The Illuminati, in this view, are the spiritual antagonists of the faithful, waging a metaphysical war through political means. This adds a layer of cosmic stakes to the conspiracy, elevating it from a political plot to a battle for the human soul. The hard science of the Bavarian Order. Here, the episode pivots from the pop myth to the hard reality. We utilize the rigorous historical research of scholars like Terry Melanson and documents from the Bavarian Archives to reconstruct the actual Illuminati. Origin story: the professor in the Jesuit stronghold. The Illuminati was not an ancient order dating back to Atlantis or the Knights Templar, as myth often suggests. It has a verified birth certificate, May 1st, 1776. Its founder, Adam Weishaupt, was a figure of immense intellect and equally immense frustration. Born in 1748 in Ingolstadt, Bavaria, Weishaupt was a professor of canon law at the University of Ingolstadt, an institution physically and intellectually dominated by the Jesuits. The context here is critical. The Enlightenment, Aufklärung, was sweeping through Europe, championing reason, empirical science, and individual liberty. However, in Bavaria, the conservative clerical establishment actively suppressed these ideas. Weishaupt, the only non-clerical professor at the university, felt besieged. He saw his students being seduced by the Jesuits into what he considered superstition and blind obedience. Weishaupt initially attempted to join the Freemasons to find a community of like-minded reformers. However, he found the Masons of Bavaria to be expensive, obsessed with occult mysticism, and intellectually shallow. He wrote, "The Masons are eating with a fork and knife, but they have nothing on their plates." Consequently, he decided to form his own secret society, originally named the Bund der Perfektibilisten, Covenant of Perfectibility. The name was clunky, and the symbol, the owl of Minerva, was chosen to represent wisdom and the ability to see in the darkness of ignorance. The structure: a pyramid of paranoia. Weishaupt designed the Illuminati to be a university of the mind, but he modeled its structure on the very organization he hated: the Jesuits. He admired their discipline, their hierarchy, and their total devotion to a cause. The order was organized into 3 classes, each containing multiple degrees. This structure was designed to vet candidates rigorously, ensuring that only the most perfectible reached the inner circle. The internal culture of the order was defined by mutual espionage. Weishaupt instituted a system called the Quibus Licet, where members were required to submit monthly reports on the character, habits, and secrets of their subordinates and peers. This created an atmosphere of intense paranoia, but Weishaupt believed it was necessary to purify the members and ensure total loyalty to Spartacus, Weishaupt's pseudonym. The catalyst: Baron von Knigge and the explosion of growth. For the first 4 years, 1776 to 1780, the Illuminati was essentially a glorified book club with fewer than 30 members, mostly Weishaupt students. It would have died in obscurity if not for the recruitment of Baron Adolf von Knigge, Philo, in 1780. Von Knigge was everything Weishaupt was not: a nobleman, a diplomat, a charismatic socialite, and a high-ranking Freemason with a vast network of contacts across Europe. Von Knigge saw the potential in Weishaupt's idea, but realized the organizational structure was amateurish. He struck a deal with Weishaupt. Von Knigge would restructure the order and rewrite the rituals to make them appealing to the aristocracy, and in exchange, Weishaupt would give him a free hand in recruitment. Under von Knigge's influence, the order exploded. Membership grew to over 2,000, extending from Bavaria to Austria, France, Italy, and Hungary. The roster of members reads like a who's who of the German Enlightenment. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, Johann Gottfried Herder, Duke Ferdinand of Brunswick, and Duke Ernest II of Saxe-Gotha all joined. However, this success planted the seeds of the order's destruction. The influx of powerful nobles and independent thinkers clashed with Weishaupt's desire for total control. Weishaupt wanted a society of obedient disciples. Von Knigge built a network of influential peers. The schism, Spartacus versus Philo. The relationship between Weishaupt and von Knigge deteriorated rapidly between 1783 and 1784. The conflict was partly ideological, but mostly ego-driven. Weishaupt was deeply insecure and jealous of von Knigge's popularity within the order. He began to undermine von Knigge, criticizing his rituals as too Masonic and too occult, despite having approved them earlier. The breaking point came when Weishaupt failed to deliver the rituals for the highest degrees, Magus and Rex. He had promised secret wisdom that he simply didn't possess. When von Knigge pressed him, Weishaupt confessed that the ancient mysteries were a fiction he had invented to keep members motivated. Von Knigge, feeling betrayed and manipulated, resigned from the order in April 1784. His departure decapitated the organization, stripping it of its most capable administrator and its connection to the aristocracy. The scandal, the sister-in-law affair. While the order was fracturing from the top, Weishaupt's moral authority was collapsing from the bottom. In 1783, Weishaupt began an affair with his deceased wife's sister, who was working as a maid in his household. When she became pregnant, Weishaupt panicked. In 18th-century Catholic Bavaria, incest, as relations with a sister-in-law were classified, and illegitimacy were career-ending crimes. Weishaupt's frantic letters to his subordinates, specifically to Xavier von Zwack, Cato, reveal a man desperate to cover up his indiscretion. He discussed procuring an abortion, a capital offense, or finding a husband to marry her off to immediately. He wrote, "I am in danger of losing my honor and my reputation, by which I have long lived. What shall I do? I am the most wretched of men." These letters were not destroyed. When the Bavarian authorities later raided Zwack's home, they found the correspondence. The revelation that the supreme leader of perfectibility was a hypocrite who preyed on his own family destroyed the order's credibility in the eyes of the public and its own members. It was not a grand geopolitical checkmate that brought down the Illuminati. It was a sordid domestic drama. The suppression, the edicts of the elector. The downfall of the Illuminati was swift, legalistic, and total. In 1784, a rival secret society, the Order of the Golden and Rosy Cross, a mystical monarchist Rosicrucian group, tipped off the Bavarian elector, Charles Theodore, about the subversive nature of the Illuminati. The elector, already suspicious of enlightened groups, issued a series of edicts. June 22, 1784. A general ban on all communities, societies, and fraternities established without government approval. March 2, 1785. A specific decree naming and suppressing the Illuminati and Freemasons, accusing them of treason and irreligion. 1787. A final draconian edict imposing the death penalty for recruiting new members into the Illuminati. Weishaupt was stripped of his university chair and banished from Bavaria in February 1785. He fled to Gotha, where Duke Ernest II gave him asylum. He lived the remaining 45 years of his life in exile, writing boring apologetics that few read and fewer believed. The Bavarian government seized the order's archives, including the embarrassing letters and the plans for the New World Order, and published them in a volume titled The Original Writings of the Order and Sect of the Illuminati. The intent of publishing the documents was to humiliate the group and warn other European monarchs. It worked. By 1787, the Bavarian Illuminati had ceased to exist as a functional organization. There is no historical evidence, zero, of the order continuing operations after this date. Deconstructing the symbols. The pop narrative conflates the Illuminati with the Freemasons and the founding of the United States. We must disentangle these threads. The Eye of Providence versus the Owl of Minerva. The most pervasive myth is that the Eye of Providence, the eye in the triangle, is the symbol of the Illuminati. This is factually incorrect. The Eye of Providence. This symbol has its roots in Renaissance Christian art. For example, Pontormo's Supper at Emmaus, 1525, where the triangle represents the Holy Trinity and the eye represents God's omniscience. It was not a sinister symbol, but a pious one. The Freemasonic connection. The Freemasons did not officially adopt the Eye of Providence until 1797, 12 years after the Illuminati was suppressed, with the publication of Thomas Smith Webb's The Freemasons' Monitor. Therefore, the Illuminati could not have infiltrated Masonry and planted the symbol, as the timeline does not fit. The Owl of Minerva. The actual symbol of the Bavarian Illuminati was the Owl of Minerva. This image, an owl perched on an open book, was featured on the medallion of the Minerval degree. It symbolized wisdom, Minerva/Athena, and the ability to see the truth in the darkness of superstition. If you see an eye, it's likely Christian or Masonic. If you see an owl on a book, that is the Illuminati. The Great Seal of the United States. The presence of the eye and the pyramid on the US dollar bill is often cited by Mars as definitive proof of Illuminati influence in America's founding. However, the history of the Great Seal contradicts this. The Great Seal was designed by 3 committees between 1776 and 1782. The only Freemason involved was Benjamin Franklin, and his ideas, which involved a scene of Moses and Pharaoh, were rejected. The eye and pyramid were suggested by Pierre-Eugène du Cimetière and William Barton, neither of whom were Masons or Illuminati. The unfinished pyramid represents strength and duration, with 13 steps for the 13 original colonies. It is unfinished to symbolize that the American project is ongoing. The eye represents providence, God, favoring the American cause. Annuit coeptis, he favors our undertakings. Novus Ordo Seclorum, conspiracy theorists translate this Latin phrase as New World Order. This is a mistranslation. It actually means a new order of the ages. It was adapted from Virgil's Eclogues to signify the beginning of the new American era, 1776, distinct from the Old World monarchies of Europe. It was a statement of independence, not global domination. The Bridge. How the Dead Order became immortal. If the Illuminati was a small, failed group of Bavarian academics, how did it become the deep state of modern legend? The answer lies in the reaction to the French Revolution. The architects of conspiracy, Baruel and Robison. When the French Revolution erupted in 1789, it shattered the worldview of Europe's conservative elite. The overthrow of the monarchy and the church was so total and so violent that many could not accept it as a spontaneous sociological event. They needed a proportional cause, a villain big enough to explain the catastrophe. In 1797, 2 authors independently published books that would create the Illuminati myth. Abbé Augustin Baruel, France, a Jesuit priest who wrote memoirs illustrating the history of Jacobinism. He argued that the revolution was the result of a triple conspiracy: Philosophes destroying the church, Freemasons destroying the monarchy, and the Illuminati controlling them all. John Robison, Scotland, a physicist and professor at the University of Edinburgh who wrote proofs of a conspiracy. Robison, a Mason himself, claimed that the Illuminati had infiltrated British lodges. He was arguably the first to articulate the idea of a covert cell subverting a benign organization. These authors took the published documents of the Bavarian Illuminati, which the Elector had released to embarrass Weishaupt, and reinterpreted them as a blueprint for the French Revolution. They ignored the fact that Weishaupt was in exile and the order was defunct. They needed a scapegoat, and the Illuminati fit the profile perfectly. The Illuminati Scare of 1798. The conspiracy theory crossed the Atlantic and became a political weapon in the United States. In 1798, Jedediah Morse, a clergyman in Massachusetts, read Robison's book and began preaching sermons warning that the Illuminati were infiltrating America. This was not a fringe idea. It was embraced by the Federalist Party. The Federalists used the Illuminati label to attack their political rivals. Thomas Jefferson and the Democratic Republicans. Because Jefferson supported the French Revolution, the Federalists accused him of being an agent of Weishaupt. This was the first Red Scare in American history, a moment where political opposition was delegitimized by accusing it of serving a foreign secret master. The Illuminati of 1798 was not a real group. It was a rhetorical device used to smear the opposition. The psychology of belief. This section pivots to the so what. It connects the history to your own mind. Why do we still believe this? The answer lies in our cognitive architecture. Agency detection and patternicity. Humans have evolved a hyperactive agency detection device. In the ancestral environment, it was safer to mistake the wind in the grass for a tiger, assuming an agent, than to mistake a tiger for the wind, assuming random noise. We are biologically hardwired to see intention behind events. Conspiracy theories like the Illuminati myth hijack this mechanism. When we look at complex, chaotic events like the French Revolution or the 2008 financial crisis, our brains struggle to accept that they are the result of impersonal systemic forces. It is cognitively more satisfying to believe that a group of people, agents, planned it. The Illuminati functions as the ultimate tiger in the grass, a hidden agent that explains the scary noises of history. Proportionality bias. This is the cognitive heuristic that dictates big events must have big causes. The event, the assassination of JFK, massive, world-changing. The reality, a lone gunman with a grudge, small, random, unsatisfying. The conspiracy, a multi-generational cabal involving the CIA, the mob, and the Illuminati. Massive, proportional, satisfying. Jim Ma's book appeals directly to this bias. By attributing every major war and recession to the Illuminati, he satisfies the reader's need for the cause to match the effect in magnitude. The historical reality that Weishaupt was a bumbling professor who couldn't even manage a small reading group is rejected because it feels too small to explain the modern world. Epistemic vigilance versus crippled epistemology. Conspiracy theories thrive in environments of crippled epistemology, where individuals lose trust in mainstream knowledge networks, universities, media, government. When epistemic trust breaks down, people retreat into closed loops of information, where the conspiracy theory becomes the new orthodoxy. The Illuminati myth is particularly resilient because it contains a self-sealing clause. The lack of evidence is cited as proof of the conspiracy's competence. Of course, there's no proof they exist today. That's how good they are. This renders the theory unfalsifiable, trapping the believer in a logic loop that no amount of historical data can penetrate. The distillate. This section of the episode translates these insights into actionable advice for the modern listener. We move from analysis to utility. 1. Lateral reading, the fact-check protocol. Most people read vertically, scrolling down a web page to judge its credibility by its design or domain name. Professional fact-checkers read laterally. When they encounter a sensational claim, for example, the Illuminati caused the French Revolution, they leave the page immediately. They open a new tab and search for the source of the claim and what other trusted sources say about it. Do not engage with the content of a conspiracy theory directly. Instead, audit the source. Who is the author? What are their credentials? Lateral reading breaks the narrative spell of the text. 2. Cognitive debiasing, the mindset check. We must actively inoculate ourselves against proportionality bias. When a major news event occurs, a pandemic, a crash, we should consciously ask, am I looking for a villain to explain this because the randomness is terrifying? Practice accepting boring explanations. Recognize that history is often driven by incompetence, error, and complex systems rather than competent malice. Weishaupt's failure is a reminder that even those who try to conspire usually fail due to human frailty. 3. Intellectual humility. The hallmark of the conspiracy theorist is certainty. The hallmark of the critical thinker is doubt. Research suggests that fostering intellectual humility, the willingness to admit I don't know, is the strongest defense against radicalization. Embrace the gray zone. When you don't understand a global event, resist the urge to fill the gap with a conspiracy. It is better to have an incomplete map of reality than a complete map that is wrong. So, to distill it all down, the Illuminati was a real group of frustrated Bavarian intellectuals who wanted to save the world through reason. But they were destroyed by their own egos and a sex scandal in 1785. Everything since then, the eye on the dollar, the global domination, the lizard people, is a ghost story we tell ourselves because we'd rather believe in an evil plan than in chaotic luck. If you want to see the actual letters Weishaupt wrote, the ones about the abortion, not world domination, check the show notes for the link to the Bavarian Archives. If you enjoyed this episode, like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon on YouTube and Spotify to get notified when we distill the next myth. This has been Distilled.